We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast's discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit a million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of Archaeoanimals. I'm Alex Fitzpatrick, and with me as always,
Simona Palanga.
And today we're actually going to do something that's a bit outside what we normally talk about, or to be honest, what we are kind of experts in. We're going to talk about Megafauna, and that's kind of a weird place, isn't it, for zooarchaeologists?
It is, but also I'd like to mention as well that it's a whole new experience, because this is also our first listener request episode.
Yes, so thank you for that request. Obviously, if you have any others, you know where to contact us on Twitter or whatever. Wait till the end of the episode, we'll do that. But yeah, if you request an episode, we will probably fast track it so that we can record it right away and it'll come out somewhat promptly.
So if you would like to request an episode where Tristan is quiet throughout the entire episode, please do.
Yes, a couple episodes, that could be a series, 10 episodes, 100 episodes. You know, if the demand is there, we obviously have to do it. The people will be speaking, and Tristan will not.
Yep. But yeah, no, it is a bit of an odd one, because of course, in terms of Megafauna, we'll be focusing mainly on the Pleistocene.
Yeah.
And well, you might think, well, isn't that sort of paleontology over zooarchaeology? And it is indeed a bit of a tricky one, because, well, as you may know, you really only talk of zooarchaeology if humans are involved in one way or another. Of course, archaeology being the study of mankind and their interactions with the environment, animals, and, all that. That's the professional correct definition. Well, of course, if humans aren't involved, then that predates humans. That's where paleontology sort of steps in.
Mm-hmm.
Though, to be fair, in this particular case, I mean, you can speak of zooarchaeology because you can cover sort of that period between the Pleistocene and anatomically modern humans overlap, which is the Paleolithic.
So the Paleolithic is basically the first period of human prehistory. So from 3.3 million years ago to 11,650 BP, which is also considered the end of the Pleistocene. So personally for me, a lot of my research ends up just pushing up at the Paleolithic, not exactly in that period, but close enough. So a lot of the stuff when we were researching was stuff that I was somewhat familiar with, but ultimately I don't really cover it per se. And Simona, as our resident expert Roman person thing,
does definitely not cover the Paleolithic.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not necessarily something you experience all the time, do you?
I think it's something that is generally not experienced all the time unless you look at it from an academic point of view. And then again, we don't exactly have a wealth of Paleolithic sites, at least in Britain. I mean, comparatively speaking, with sites from other time periods, because of course, it mainly be sort of hunter-gatherer societies that would likely move around a lot. you wouldn't leave a lot in terms of actual, archaeological features. There'll be scatters of animal remains, flint scatters, which were not necessarily being readily visible sort of in the soil. So like when you go down in the stratigraphy. So it's just something that primarily it's not as easy to identify. And there's probably not as many of them anyway, because, well, at that time, there was a lot less of us as well. A lot less.
Lot less.
So, of course, as you may have guessed, it is in the Paleolithic that man-made artifacts start to become prevalent. I mean, they're not entirely new. We do see some sort of tool usage dating way before then, but they become more prevalent.
Yeah.
And that's when also conventionally Homo sapiens starts forming small hunter-gatherer societies. And then again, that's as we currently understand, because then we could go into a whole other conversation of what constitutes a society. But no, not now.
Maybe later.
Yeah. But maybe if someone puts in a request. But yeah, anything prior to that will be classed as paleontology. So say you've got a site that does date back to the Paleolithic, so therefore anatomically modern humans were about, but there's actually no trace of them on your particular site. You've merely got faunal remains that have nothing to do with human activity. So say you've got a site and there's some boar and there's some deer and there's scavenging marks from hyenas, and that is your site. So would that be zooarchaeology or paleontology? Because you're just looking at the animals.
That would be the start of a fight, would it not? The paleontologists, the archaeologists line up. Right. Let's see how much human activity is here. I'll give you some human activity to deal with. I take it nobody's ever fought a paleontologist here, have they?
I mean, I can.
Yeah, no, totally. Me too. Like,
is that like a dare?
I think it's more like a just, experience, I definitely could. Yeah. I could take on paleontologist or two. Like, I don't know. Would you rather take on one, I don't know, archaeoastronomer or 10 paleontologists? It's one of those questions, 10 ducks or 10 duck-sized dinosaurs.
I mean, if I have a big enough bat, I could probably take them all out in one go.
That is true. Simone, you ever fought a paleontologist?
No, why can't we all just get along?
No. Never.
It's a sight fight.
Yeah, I choose violence every day. I don't really. I'm a very sweet girl.
Have you eaten?
No.
Okay.
You can tell. But no, it's an interesting question. And I'm very interested in kind of non-anthropocentric zooarchaeologies. But again, there's the difference in that I work in much later periods. So there isn't necessarily that issue of, is that paleontology if you're only focusing on the animals, But it is, I've been asked that before, because obviously, I mean, Simona, you've probably gotten this before. I think all archaeologists end up getting that question, which is, oh, do you dig up dinosaurs, And of course, you're like, oh, well, that's more like paleontology. And then, of course, eventually you get the question of, oh, well, if you do prehistoric animals, isn't that paleontology? And it becomes kind of it's a bit of a...
It depends.
Yeah, it's a bit weird and different. I've gotten questions about fossils before, and I've had to explain, it's not really what I do. I get more of, the actual bones.
Yeah, I guess subfossil at best.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think it's good, though, we're doing an episode that's a bit paleontology, and also shout out to our paleontologist comrades who do a lot of hard work on stuff that I do not understand.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I guess the procedures are just completely different, and the way of digging, and just because I wouldn't be able to wrap my head around just, you don't have anything clear on the ground of where the archaeology is. So you're like, oh, we'll dig there. And I'm sure there's a rationale.
Yeah, and also, I feel with identifications and stuff, at least with, if I'm dealing with, say, a chicken or a horse, I know what a horse actually looks like. So in my brain, it helps a little bit more when it comes to identifications and kind of examining and interpreting remains, but when it comes to like megafauna, I don't know. It's a big thing.
Yes, especially if you go deeper back sort of into paleontology, because also knowing a bit about animal remains, you have an idea of what bits are meant to be where on an animal. But then if you go on species that have been extinct a million years ago and you find this bone, it's like, yeah, okay, that is a bone that goes somewhere.
Yeah, it's Calvin ball. It's just, there are no rules when it comes to that stuff. But yeah, it might be helpful to kind of talk about what the Pleistocene actually is before we get a little bit more on track maybe with this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's what is known, as the Ice Age.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the Pleistocene is part of the Quaternary epochs, which is made up of the Pleistocene and the Holocene, which is the time we live in now. Although suggestions of an Anthropocene epoch has also been put forward, so we may actually be living on yet another epoch altogether. But back to the Pleistocene. So the Pleistocene itself can be divided into 3 ages. So you have the early, often known as the Villafranchian, middle, and late. Now, think about the Pleistocene, or sort of the Ice Age is known. Of course, you wouldn't have been a perennial, just millions of years of just ice. It was more of an alternation between glaciations and interglacials. And these start to become really prominent towards sort of the end of the middle and the late Pleistocene. Of course, that's quite interesting to note, because also a way to find out sort of whether you're dealing with a period of glaciation or an interglacial is by identifying the species that you recover sort of on site. So say, for example, during a period of glaciation, you tend to find more species that are adapted to tundra and taiga environments, such as the mammoth and the woolly rhino. And then during the interglacial instead, you'll find species that are more suited to temperate climates. So you start getting your deer, your boar, and so you almost see sort of these different types of species almost sort of replacing each other.
Mm-hmm.
So you see some species being more prevalent, and then you see the glacial ones coming about, and then they sort of slowly peter out again, and so forth.
And I think that also kind of shows a dimension of paleontology that, for the most part, zooarchaeologists don't really deal with, which is you have these, interglacial and glaciations occurring. So having these species that you can identify to different periods helps you understand, the kind of passage of time and the changes in environment, which obviously some zooarchaeologists do, but I feel like it's much more vital for paleontologists to kind of deal with that. If that makes sense.
Well, because I guess it's also so far removed that in a way, now I don't mean to say that paleoenvironmental reconstruction becomes more important, but it's just because we know less of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
While, say, if you're doing medieval archaeology, yes, paleoenvironmental reconstructions will be very, very important, but also you do have other means to go by, such as the written record, that also inform you of what the environment and the climate would have been like. So I guess it's
mm-hmm.
The Pleistocene will be more of a 500-piece puzzle, and you're missing 450.
Exactly. And obviously, there's much more dramatic changes. And I think it's also, like you were saying, it's a time scale difference where, if you're a zooarchaeologist, you may specifically do the medieval period. And, that's however hundreds of years versus paleontologists, which will span, thousands upon thousands.
Or just millions even.
Yeah. I mean, the time scale thing is something I always kind of can't deal with. As someone who kind of goes between, my PhD research was the Neolithic, the very end of the Mesolithic to the late medieval period. And my brain still doesn't really comprehend how much time that is. You kind of just flatten it.
No, because it's difficult to imagine that, thinking about it. Because, of course, we're humans, so we're very anthropocentric in the way we look things. But in the grand scheme of things, we're just a blip.
Yep.
In the history of the world. They're just a whole history has gone by for millions and millions and millions of years, and then it's just the last couple was okay, Homo sapiens. And then we wreck everything. Just like,
Yep. We were like, how much damage can we do in the small amount of time we've been here?
It's just like
and boy, did we do it.
Just like the guy that shows up late to the party and then just trashes everything. That's us.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's, it's a place of honor, truly. And I think the one last thing I want to cover before we take a break is, we are talking about megafauna, and there might be some listeners out there who are thinking, what is megafauna anyway? And they're just big animals, folks. I mean, there's a bit more to it. So megafauna and extinct species, they are extinct species. I've heard people before kind of talk about them like they're two different things. And maybe that's just me. It literally means big animals. So, that's kind of the terminology you use when we were talking about this period of time. Because obviously a lot of these animals were much, much bigger until, we came around and decided to mess everything up. It's usually used for terrestrial animals, it seems like. There's a paper, we will put a link to it, or we will cite it in the show notes. But there was a paper that just came out last year that was kind of talking about how it's a weird kind of terminology that's very loose, and it seems to be mostly used for terrestrial animals. No one really seems to use it for marine mammals, for example. And it's the actual definition seems to be very liminal and plays loose with what they actually use for megafauna. So it means large animal, but is that mass? Is that length? Does it refer to the largest animal of a species or a largest animal of a specific clade? But for this episode, we are basically just using it to refer to big animals.
Wait, I think I've got it though. What? Is it animals that had big chunky toes?
You know what? The paper that I read did not have anything about big chunky toes. And honestly, I feel like reviewer number 2 should have caught that. I should have been asked to review that, and I would have pointed that out, of course, as an expert of big chunky toes. There's probably, if I think hard enough about it, there's probably a nice scientific name I can give myself as an expert, but I haven't eaten dinner yet, so I won't.
Biggest chunkus toesus?
I mean, nah.
We'll think about it during the break.
Yeah. Quick, go to a break before Tristan can start talking.
Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high-quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code ANIMALS.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
And everyone. We are back with Archaeoanimals, and today we are talking about Megafauna and doing a little bit of paleontology, a little bit of zooarchaeology. If you haven't listened to the first segment, first of all, why did you skip to the second segment? But, we already talked about that. Anyway, so we're going to get into a bit of, some examples of kind of megafauna. And I think maybe the most, emblematic of the idea of megafauna might be the mammoth, but also the mastodon. But I feel like some people don't even know are different animals.
Yeah, don't mix them up. It's not very nice.
No. To be fair, I don't think I realized they were two different animals till like a couple years ago. So, and also, I don't know about you, Simona, but blanket disclaimer, at least for me personally, I am going to pronounce so many words wrong. It's going to be, if you are a paleontologist, I apologize. You might want to turn it off now. It may be unlistenable how much I just butcher the pronunciations, but,
You're just creating a neologism. It's fine. I mean, all mine are going to sound like Roman senators.
That is true. I mean, you should probably just have you pronounce all of them, but I will try my best.
That's like you pronounce them and they'll just do a voiceover over the recording. It's just like dubbed.
I will say, actually, just a quick tangent. I watched a video on YouTube the other night about ancient Chinese recipes for the Lunar New Year, which, as we're recording this, is coming up this week. And they clearly had someone coach them on the Chinese words and names, and then just copied and pasted that recording over and over again in the video. It was so like weird, It was amazing. We should probably do that, maybe.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, no. Anyway, so yeah, mammoths and mastodons, they are two different megafauna. So the mastodon refers to any proboscidean, basically an elephant-like creature from the Mammutidae family in this case. Not the American metal band. I assume you wrote that note, because I did not.
Yeah, just...
I was about to chime in and say Crack the Sky is a great album by Mastodon, but Simona beat me to it. Well done, Simona. I appreciate that.
Please.
I don't know. Yeah,
I recognized that.
No.
I saw that.
How do I turn off your mic?
Right, okay. We'll go once more around the sun. Right?
Yeah, of course, proboscidean meaning literally like from proboscides, I believe, just as a trunk.
Yeah. So like an elephant type thing, basically. And a mammoth is any species from the Mammuthus genus, but they're both part of the Elephantomorpha group. So if anyone out there is building family trees while we're doing this episode, post it to us on Twitter. We will check your work.
Again, literally meaning elephant-shaped. Like the whole tangent we had in the Easter episode on the lagomorph. It's like hair-shaped.
Yeah, we're really good with these names, huh? I could have named them. Wow.
They look a bit like an elephant. I'll tell you what. Elephant-shaped. Elephantomorpha. That's the one. I'm a genius.
That could have been me. I was born the wrong time. I could have been naming these things. Clearly it was like a really easy job. Anyway, so the main differences are basically quite physical. Mastodons were shorter and stockier with shorter and straighter tusks. And the teeth of a mastodon are a bit more cone-shaped. Like specifically the canines were more cone-shaped. And this is because they actually grazed a bit more on wood. And this is in contrast to mammoths who grazed in grasslands and thus had flatter molars. But the two megafauna actually kind of overlapped during the mid-Pleistocene. So the mastodons lived in the warmer periods and the mammoths lived in the colder ones. So there you go. They are actually two different megafauna, even though, to be completely honest, they look mostly the same.
It's like all the paleontology rage.
I'm not a paleontologist. You can't get mad at me.
You should have done an episode about it.
It's fine. It's an homage to the paleontologists.
But yeah, and speaking of, so I guess, animals that pop into your mind straight away when you think of the Pleistocene, another one is, the saber-toothed tiger, which isn't a tiger. And also there is several species that are usually referred under the catch-all term of saber-toothed cat. So the saber-toothed cats is actually what is usually referred to as an extinct tribe of Felidae. So a cat-shaped thing. Usually, so like, again, by saber-toothed cat, we tend to mean sort of any feline species that has very elongated canines. However, as I mentioned before, like many different species existed, and they actually belong to two separate groups. So you have the tribe of the Omotherini, which is the scimitar-toothed cats, and the Smilodontini, which are the dirk-toothed cats. Now, the difference, again, is very morphological. So in the Omotherine cat, you tend to see sort of shorter, more curved, and generally flatter canines compared to the Smilodontines, or Smilodontines. So, of course, the most famous genera in this category is the Smilodon, the saber-tooth felid, which lived in America. So, I think the most famous species, the one that comes to our minds the most, is probably Smilodon fatalis, which I think, some of them were found in some really nice sort of Pleistocene sites in California, while the species that tend to live in Europe were the Omotherium, which were a scimitar-toothed cat. And I appreciate that probably sounded very, very confusing. But yes, so you have the Omotheriums and the Smilodons. Smilodons mainly in America, saber-toothed felids, and Omotherium in Europe with scimitar-toothed.
I mean, I feel like a lot of my respect for paleontologists, despite the fact that I've been dunking on them a little bit this episode, is that these are just huge words. Obviously, as a zooarchaeologist, you usually have to use the scientific names of animals, especially when you're writing up reports and things like that. But these are just woof.
And then I guess like a zooarchaeology report would be mostly like Ovicapra. Small to medium-sized mammal.
Simona, stop reading my reports out loud on the podcast. It's embarrassing.
But yeah, no, sorry, it's actually just occurred to me that I was saying, alternating between the scimitar and dirk-toothed cats, so many times that I think I mix them up at the end of it. So I'll recap once more. So you have the Smilodon, which lived in America, and he was a dirk-toothed cat. So they were a little bit longer and less curved canines. Then in Europe, you had mostly Omotheriums, or cats of the Omotherini tribe, which were scimitar-toothed cats, where the canines were shorter, more curved, and generally flatter. Yay. Made it.
You can't see it. I'm just shaking my head because it's just so much. I don't know how they do it. How do you do it, paleontologists? Please tweet at us. Let us know. Yeah, but technically we do science and it's not that hard in comparison. No, it's hard actually. It's always hard.
Oh, imagine Pleistocene fish.
No, absolutely not. Nope. They're called fish. They have no other names. No one cares enough to give it to them. If you are a fish paleontologist, do not at me. I do not want to hear it from you.
I think it's quite cute that a saber-toothed cat's species name is Smilodon, smile. I just think that's just a nice coincidence. I know it has no etymological kind of standing, but I just think it's cute, a smiley don. I just like it.
Yeah, because they're called that way because they used to have that big grin right before they swallowed you whole.
Oh, I thought they were bite and tear predators, but yeah, Simona, you're the expert here.
100% how it happened, because with a smile, you'd lull the Homo sapiens into a false sense of security, and just when they think,
of course,
when they gain your trust, then bam, that's when they strike.
Just like modern cats.
I mean, yeah, one of the main kind of arcs or themes in this podcast, I can't believe we have themes in this podcast, but one of them I feel is that the more things change, the more things stay the same, So saber-toothed tigers, regular cats, same thing, basically.
But you know what? I am waiting for this human saber-toothed cat burial where they just go, it's a person sat down and there's a saber-toothed cat on top of them because they sat there for cuddles and then they felt that they couldn't get up.
I mean, it's definitely happened, right?
Please
like, we were just looking for it.
Someone find that burial. It's out there. It's out there somewhere.
Or if you're a time traveler, take one for the team. It would be really funny.
Yes, I'll go out and find the modern day Smilodon that's, just roaming around the English
I said
countryside.
if you were a time traveler,
Oh,
Tristan, a time traveler. Gosh.
Okay, fine.
Anyway, we're going to go from a cute name to a very weird name. So, giant sloths. First of all, did not realize loads of different giant sloths. Thought there was just one. So that's already an interesting lesson to learn while doing research for this episode. We're not going to look at all of them, obviously. There's many different species, but I just picked 2 examples. So you have the Megatherium americanum. So I guess a little biased, but it's actually located in South America. And its main claim to fame was that it was one of the last pieces of fossils that were identified from Charles Darwin's fossil collection, which is actually really interesting. And the next one is Megalonyx jeffersoni, which was, you guessed it, originally analyzed and written about by that giant nerd, President Thomas Jefferson. And guess he got it named after him. I believe he coined the name Megalonyx because Jefferson was kind of a weirdo in many respects and also a terrible person, but he was very interested in, archaeology and excavations, and he seemed to also have a bit of a interest in fossils. And so a general from the army in the late 1700s sent him over a bunch of fossils that they found, I believe, in a cave. And he wrote about how it was the Megalonyx, which is, again, another giant sloth. Both of these are from different families, but again, both considered giant sloths. So, who knew? Interestingly, the Megatherium, so the South American one, is been kind of the center of controversy. Some people think it was actually a carnivore, but most likely they were both herbivores. So, there's a little drama for you.
But what was the basis of people thinking it might have been a carnivore?
I think it was mostly because, one, it's a giant thing. So, that's just the thing people think.
In the Pleistocene, as far as I know, most of the giant things were not carnivores.
It was the idea that it was eventually near the end of its, run, I guess, as a species, was trying to supplant their diet with more carnivorous, approaches to eating. And it doesn't really seem to be the case, but I just thought that was really interesting to bring up. It seems like a wild thing to say.
I mean, I guess it's something that might have happened eventually. Of course, I know next to nothing about the ecology of giant sloths, except for the fact that there's various different species and they tend to be confined to the American continent.
Mm-hmm.
But you see that with deer and other herbivores in present day, that they will occasionally supplement, well, not necessarily on meat, but on bones to get the calcium that they need. So I guess it wouldn't be completely absurd a theory. But that's just me making suppositions because, hey, this is also my podcast, so I shall make suppositions. I guess maybe some of that may have happened, but I don't know enough about it to comment on whether they did switch to a more carnivorous diet. Because it has happened for some Pleistocene species. I think we'll cover that a little bit more in the case studies, where some that were mainly herbivorous and are present-day mainly herbivorous have actually just gone carnivorous in certain locations. Or in the opposite sense, another example, well, in the reverse, being the cave bear, which it turns out was a herbivore. You see this big scary bear. No hunting, no, not for me.
Big mood.
But here's a species where meat eating was definitely for them, and that's hyenas, which I guess is perhaps another one that is most known when you think specifically sort of the Pleistocene of Europe, so that hyenas do come to mind. Of course, when we speak of hyenas, there's actually 3 different genera that were present in the European Pleistocene. So you have the genus hyena, which is actually, it doesn't look very much like what people picture when they think of hyenas. You'll be familiar with the genus hyena when you think of striped hyenas that are present mainly in Asia today, so hyena. And then you have Euriboas, which is extinct, and the genus Crocuta, which is actually, Crocuta is the spotted hyena, which is what actually comes to mind when you think of a hyena. So, again, Paleolithic together with a brown hyena, very prominent in the African continent. So now, genus sort of Crocuta, the spotted hyena, was happily roaming around Europe as well during the Pleistocene, because why not? That would go a bit of a tour. Although, actually, the spotted hyena originated from Asia, even though at present day they're confined to the African continent. And interestingly, striped hyenas, which I mentioned before, that mainly live in Asia today, actually originated in Africa. So they did themselves a bit of a swap. Back to the spotted hyena that was very prevalent in Europe. They would have looked, I guess, very much like present-day spotted hyenas, of course, larger than their present-day relative, and slightly shorter and thicker metapodials, but the long bones were longer. And of course, maybe there probably would have been some differences which you won't necessarily recover in archaeological record, because I guess the fur would have been a bit thicker. So if you're roaming around sort of the UK and it's covered in glaciers. But then, of course,
as you do.
Well, that's a Saturday for me. So I guess unless you find sort of a specimen preserved in permafrost, well, yeah. Not going to know much about that from the bones alone. Again, like the spotted hyena today, the cave hyena, which is more of a subspecies really, because it's Crocuta spelea, would have had incredibly powerful premolars and elongated carnassials, which pretty much turn into sort of enamel scissors. Very, very, very good for shearing. And we have very good evidence of the species all across Europe. I mean, 2 of the best examples I can think of in the UK are Kirkdale Cave, that's in Yorkshire, and Creswell Crags, sort of in between the Nottinghamshire-Derbyshire border, which is also home to the best preserved cave hyena cub in Europe, affectionately known as Eric. And I've seen him, and he's the cutest thing.
Oh, and I think we'll kind of touch upon that in the next segment when we do our case studies.
And why not?
Yeah, so let's take a break and we will be back with case studies.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage. Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
And we are back with everyone's favorite segment, the case studies. Bow, 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 bow. That was an air horn. I've been told I do a really good air horn impression, so you're welcome. Use that as your ringtone. But yeah, since we were just talking about Creswell Crags, I might as well start off with that as a case study. More specifically, the Robin Hood's Cave which actually I didn't look it up, but I don't know if you know, Simona, why it's actually called the Robin Hood's Cave.
It's more of a myth than anything, because Creswell Crags being on the Derbyshire-Nottinghamshire border, it is rumoured that Robin Hood himself has taken shelter in this cave.
I'm always very interested in like cave names. Maybe it's something that's very specific to Britain, just because a lot of the cave names tend to be something that's based on folklore. For instance, this is a bit of a tangent. One of the caves that I worked on is called Laird's Stables, on the myth, well, not really myth, more like the local legend that it was used as a stable for horses during the Jacobite uprisings. And we only found one bit of horse the entire time we've excavated it, so I don't know how true that is.
I mean, chances are it might have happened. I mean, going a bit more of a tangent, the village that I'm originally from is known because it's an old medieval burg and has caves like directly underneath it. And they were extensively used, I guess, archaeologically, especially sort of when the Arabs invaded and they were sieging the village. They were actually sheltering within the caves until the village eventually fell. But going fast forward 1,000 years or so, they were actually being used to keep livestock up until the 1960s.
Oh.
So if you go visit them now, there's a lot of bits and bobs or like very, very post-medieval stuff, because they just repurpose them to keep livestock.
Huh.
So
that's interesting.
I believe like pigs specifically. I'm not
I will say, though, these caves were so small and tight to get into. I don't know. Whatever. I guess we were just pretty happy to find one horse bone in that entire cave. But anyway, Robin Hood's Cave. So, as we basically just explained in this opening part of the segment, it's part of the Creswell Crags cave complex on the Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire border, and it's most famous for the Robin Hood Cave horse, which was a partial rib engraved with a horse figure dating back to the Upper Paleolithic. So, most likely first occupied by Neanderthals 40,000 years ago, followed by Homo sapiens around 20,000 years ago BP, and it seems to also had occasional occupation by hyenas. One of the kind of interpretations I read about it basically said that a lot of the older faunal remains were likely brought in by hyenas as scavengers. So you got a lot of gnawed bone there, which is very interesting. And I also am very interested in those kind of life history of caves, because obviously you don't have one person, one group of people usually living in a cave for an extended period of time. You have people leave, come back, and other species like hyenas come in. And aside from that cave horse, it also had a wealth of lithics and butchered animal remains, one of which I'm actually interested in, of course, and the other I could care less about. You can guess which is which if you would like. And of course, you know me, I love drama, love controversy.
Not lithics.
Not lithics. So I, of course, found the one controversy in this cave. So there was a saber-toothed canine that was found here in 1875 by Professor William Boyd Dawkins, and apparently was completely mired in controversy because many people thought that Dawkins, who was a huge paleontologist, planted the tooth. And first of all, I love that. That's great. That's amazing.
But also, was it a scimitar-toothed cat or a dirk-toothed cat?
I mean, was it even a saber-toothed canine? Because if we're following this logic, who knows at this point? But another thing I want to point out is, like you said before, this was Victorian era excavations. So they were just blowing it up with dynamite. So I don't know why the main controversy was some guy might have planted a tooth when they were blowing up faunal remains left and right, probably.
I don't want to think about that.
I do love that, though. I mean, just, just come in with like a saber tooth from your personal fossil collection, because of course he would have probably had one, and just like slipped it in the the soil heap. Smooth move.
Oh.
Listen, we have to bring the drama. I've realized, looking back, we haven't had much drama on this podcast other than me dunking on Tristan, and then that's not really drama. That's just, correct. And and so I love that every so often, if I can find some drama, I want to bring it up because that's incredible and hilarious. And apparently, like, this Professor Dawkins was just kind of followed by this controversy until he died. So
is there any drama that you'd like us to bring up in a future episode? Please
let us know.
Yeah, ask us on Twitter with #drama or archaeodrama.
Oh, yes, archaeodrama. I mean, let's be real. There's always archaeodrama. But we mean, like, this kind of archaeodrama. I want to hear about the archaeologist that slips an entire, like, replica of beaker pottery into a spoil heap and goes, oh, look what I found here. We love to see it. I mean, we don't love to see it, but on a level of, just being entertained, we love to see it. Anyway, this went off on a tangent.
I'm sorry, I'm picturing a replica beaker like in Viking Coppergate. Inside as a saber-toothed cat tooth, but like not like a Smilodon, the American one. In a beaker in Viking Coppergate below the floorboards.
Yeah, just that's so interesting. Like, even back then, people, just having that be prevalent is fascinating. And I think a lot of the times, I don't know about you, but I always forget about the actual intricacies of excavation, Like, oh, there was people excavated this kind of stuff, and, they definitely had drama.
Yeah, no, like I will say, fortunately, like, yeah, I've not experienced any similar dramas. So.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah.
So we live vicariously through the late 1800s, truly.
But yeah, and for the other case study, I thought I'd do something. Well, we'll do something a little different that probably I thought that maybe a few people would not have heard about, and it might get a little confusing. Hopefully it won't. I mean, I've proven time and time again to be incredibly good at confusing myself, so we'll give this a shot.
You did a lot of confusing yourself this episode, to be honest, but also I was confused too.
Archaeoconfusion.
#archaeodrama, #archaeoconfusion.
I say confusion of the drama or drama because you're confused. But anyway, Pleistocene fauna of Sicily is what I'll be covering in this case study. Because I thought we'd do, a case study to, somewhere that is in Britain, which is
rare.
To be very Britain-centric. And of course, being incredibly biased, I did choose my homeland, but also because, in a way, the Pleistocene fauna of Sicily is incredibly interesting, as in it represents an insular type of fauna. For those who have not heard of it, there's a rule called the island rule that's been developed by Foster in the 60s, according to which insular mammalian populations tend to differ in size from their mainland counterpart. So usually, you see megafauna becoming considerably smaller, so also known as insular dwarfism, and small mammals that instead become considerably larger, also known as insular gigantism. Allegedly, this is all driven by a reduction of resource intake for larger mammals, which leads to a decrease in size, and smaller mammals actually thriving on the absence of large predators, or making the most of the resources they have available to them, meaning that they progressively get larger. Of course, there are exceptions, and this rule isn't strictly limited to islands, as we do see sort of fairly similar processes occurring in caves or just generally isolated areas, like very isolated mountains or even some sort of valleys. Now, the chief example of insular dwarfism in Sicily is represented by Palaeoloxodon falconeri, to friends known as the pygmy elephant, but technically the Maltese pygmy elephant, also known as the Sicilian dwarf elephant. As you may suspect, it's a very small elephant.
Who knew?
Who would have thought? Which likely derives from the straight tusk elephant, except that in its insular form, the shoulder height of an adult male was just shy of 1 meter. So basically, a large dog. So picture a world where elephants are the size of dogs. So yeah, this species, a good old friend, Palaeoloxodon falconeri, also a Roman senator,
I mean, that is absolutely a senator name. Come on.
I mean, they're likely to have reached Malta and then subsequently Sicily via North Africa. As you find, it is usually the case, or one of the main cases of the fauna of Sicily, even later on, you do tend to have a lot of sort of North African species making their way up, as well as from the mainland, to be fair. So it's just one of the two main ways, again, that, as you'd expect, animals will be crossing into Sicily, mainland and North Africa, both very, very close. So no surprise there. But one thing that I thought was interesting, going back sort of slightly onto a more like folklore and mythology route, the recovery of dwarf elephant skulls in antiquity may have contributed to the belief in existence of the Cyclops described in classical literature.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I was told that, if you've never heard that, go look up even just a regular elephant skull. I mean, I believe it. Elephant skulls are weird.
Yeah, because of the hole where the nasal cavity is, and because of the size of it, I mean, to the uninitiated, you just found that in the ground or in a cave where you've taken shelter, that is going to look like a giant eye socket.
Absolutely. I mean, if I didn't know what a elephant looked like, I'd probably say that.
And also to look at sort of the other side of the scale, and looking at insular gigantism, a very good example for Sicily is none other than the giant dormouse, which was actually the size of a cat.
That is amazing.
So
that certainly is an unusual size.
Yeah, it looks like, actually, to be specific, the giant dormouse was the size of a cat, and their head alone was the size of a full dormouse. Just to put it into perspective some more.
I think I need someone to do fan art of that.
Just with the little scales, and then just like a giant dormouse, and then a little dormouse drawn on top of the head, like inside of it places. The Adventures of a Dormouse and Giant Dormouse.
Could you imagine the size of the hole that it digs through the side of your skirting board? Honestly,
you hear the scratching. Oh, it's trying to get in. It's really trying to get in.
Is it scratching or more of a giant, banging?
Do we have a hole from the kitchen to the living room yesterday? No, we do not.
You might as well put in a cat flap. But yesterday, picture a world where elephants are the size of dogs and dormice are the size of cats. Welcome to Pleistocene Sicily, everyone. Although the giant dormouse, it wasn't just endemic to Sicily. And it is particularly fascinating in its own right, because the species is found across the Balearic Islands, as well as the mainland of Spain. But in each of these locations, the species underwent a slightly different evolutionary path that led to different sizes, that of course, derived from the environment that they were in, but also different diet, with some becoming more carnivorous and some becoming more herbivorous. So the dormouse that was found in Sicily was primarily herbivorous, but actually, I believe the giant dormouse that was found in the Balearic Islands was more carnivorous. And if I remember correctly, even to present day, where the dormice are still about, much smaller, of course, but still bigger, slightly bigger than your average dormouse, I think they do tend to be slightly more carnivorous over there still.
Oh, okay. So can't really dunk on the carnivorous giant sloth thing that hard.
Well, that's exactly the example I was referring to in the second segment, because it all comes down to the fact that, these animals were filling an available ecological niche. So, of course, in the Balearic Islands, there would have been, more meat to eat. Through speciation, you will slowly, go towards that.
Yeah.
But in a way, polar bears are pretty much obligate carnivores. So they've gone from the bear that is purely an omnivorous animal to becoming an obligate carnivore, because of course in the region that they live in, that they've adapted to, you're not going to find an awful lot of vegetation, are you?
That is true.
And again, interestingly enough, picture this world some more. Giant dormice the size of cats, elephants the size of dogs. There was also a giant barn owl.
No. No.
Are we adding owls to the list of animals that Alex doesn't like?
No, I like owls. The idea of a giant barn owl frightens me.
Okay. Fans of owls, you can put your torch and pitchforks down. You don't need to join the fish people.
No, fish people, you're still on notice.
I love owls, and I love barn owls.
I've got a question, someone. How can you... When did this barn owl live? Were there actually barns when this barn owl was around? Because I thought we were talking about, like, the Pleistocene. Unless there's, like, the barn builders of the Pleistocene in Sicily or wherever.
But it's just called
atheists.
It's just called a cave. Duh.
So is it not just a cave owl? Like, why is it a barn owl? This is why I can't trust paleo people.
Well, because I guess probably like the naming of the barn owl with its current common name probably predates the discovery of a Pleistocene barn owl.
Duh.
Oh.
I still think you can't have a barn owl without barns. I'm just saying.
Well, maybe there were barns. Maybe actually dormice were very skilled barn builders. What do you know? If they can tunnel through your kitchen, they can build a barn, all right?
And I think that's a great place to end this episode. Just, yeah.
I haven't heard anything about the barn owls, though.
Oh, yeah. Okay, what about the barn owl, Simona?
If I know, it was more something interesting because you get giant dormice, that got a lot bigger. Barn owls also got a lot bigger. So I do wonder, like, is that something that's completely unrelated, or did the barn owls grow larger along with the dormice so they could still hunt them?
So does that mean the barn got bigger too?
Oh yeah, because you just big barn covered the entire island.
Yeah, like is it giant barn owl? Is it because the owl's big, or is it because the barn is big?
I'm going to take an educated guess and say the owl was big.
But do we know that?
Ask a paleontologist.
Okay, that's a good place to end this episode. At the end of the day, we should probably just ask a paleontologist.
Don't listen to us. Just ask a paleontologist.
Anyway, you can find us on Twitter at ArchaeoAnimals. If you like this episode and want to request your own, please feel free. If you want to, if you're a paleontologist who hated this episode completely, please email Tristan and like and subscribe to our podcast. We are basically wherever you get your podcasts. You can also listen to us at archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/animals, and we'll see you next episode.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to ArchaeoAnimals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us on Twitter at ArchaeoAnimals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV Traveling America, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Rachel Roden.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to archpodnet.com/members for more info.